body at ease, breathing quiet, sentiment, benevolent. Dharma friends, sitting still in vital silence, wanting nothing, we practice eco-Buddhism together. The sound of the temple bell booms for all to cease from conflict. May the way of Buddha usher in the dawn of non-violent global village forever. Here is the after sound of the bell. Thunder of silence, light after Dharma rain. Om Amokha Vairocana Maha Mudra Mani Padma Chavala Pravataya
Please join me in these simple stretches. Please stand. So, good morning, everyone. We will begin by taking refuge, first in Sino-Korean, in keeping with our tradition, and then a second time in English, so you have some idea of the meaning. So, even if you're not sure of the words, just throw your voice in with the sound. Chi sim Yem Yang E Chi Wang Sam Se Shem Ang Sha Now in English, I go for refuge to the Buddha.
I go for refuge to the Buddha.
And resolve with all beings.
And resolve with all beings.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment.
And realize the great way.
And realize the great way.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
And resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will penetrate the teachings
I will penetrate the teachings
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
I go for refuge to the Sangha
I go for refuge to the Sangha
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many
I will seek peace and happiness for the many
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
So please return now for just a shorter period of meditation, about 5 to 10 minutes. So just beginning with a reading from the Dhammapada. Just a little closer. Can you all hear me okay? It's okay? So as we listen to the words of the Buddha, just bringing hands palm to palm and deepening our breathing. A little composure. This reading is from a chapter called Desire. 36 streams are rushing toward you. Desire and pleasure and lust. Play in your imagination with them, and they will sweep you away. Powerful streams, they flow everywhere. Strong vine, if you see it spring up, take care. Pull it out by the roots. Pleasures flow everywhere. You float upon them and are carried from life to life. Like a hunted hare, you run. The pursuer of desire pursued, harried from life to life. Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's really nice to see people in person, see some faces, some new faces, some faces I just met last week, some faces that I recognize. And for our folks online, I'm imagining your faces there. My name is Jagwa Kelly Davenport. I'm a recent graduate of our Maitreya Buddhist Seminary program, which is why if you've seen me in the past, I wasn't wearing this big brown robe, which I'm still kind of getting used to. It's a lot of fabric to manage. And so was recently ordained as our newest Dharma teacher, which is quite humbling. And so I wanted to talk a little bit today about that experience of studying to become a teacher, and sort of what our particular tradition says about the teacher-student relationship and what does it mean to be a teacher or a student. So, remember my notes. So on the 4th of July, I got up at 5 in the morning and my husband drove me and another temple member to Chicago, where we have a temple there, a sister temple, for the ordination ceremony. And also some of you may have taken precepts later that same day, either on Zoom or if you were in Chicago in person. So it's sort of an auspicious day. And I hadn't visited the Chicago temple before. It's in an old Freemason hall. So you can imagine this sort of 3 or 4 story big masonry and stone building near Wrigley Stadium in Chicago. And when you walk into the Buddha hall, the windows are really high and the altar is enormous because the ceilings are probably, 20 feet tall. So there's this big wooden platform and there's a gold Buddha and a couple of bodhisattvas on either side. And it's probably 4 feet tall, much bigger than some of the ones that we have here, and sort of breathtaking. And I walked in with Haju, and the room was all set up and there were programs on the chairs with my name on them. And I think we both felt the prick of tears. And she said, I don't know why, but I think I'm crying a little bit. And I said, me too. I sort of had that feeling of a wedding or something. And so I just wanted to kind of offer this talk in the spirit of standing on that threshold. There's a lot of poignancy in a sort of change of state, whether it is this particular experience of taking vows to become a formal teacher, or any of the other kind of maybe more ordinary thresholds that we are always kind of crossing over in our life. We don't often pause to really experience the threshold. And so maybe that's a little bit of the theme of this talk. So the teacher-student relationship in Buddhism is really a core aspect. When I was walking up the stairs to the second floor of Buddha Hall in Chicago, Haju pointed out these tall portraits along one wall of some of our Korean ancestors, both men and women, who are renowned teachers from many hundreds or thousands of years ago. And in a very real sense, because they practiced and transmitted teachings, that's why we are sitting here today. I think it's easy to forget about that. As I was sitting in meditation this morning with the mosquitoes and the cicadas and occasionally our duck Dewey, who lives with our chickens, and the bus outside on Packard announcing itself, I couldn't help but think of some of the early Buddhist practitioners who practiced outside. We have a beautiful canopy here. They would have practiced in places like Deer Park. There were some grounds that they visited owned by a benefactor whose name was Anathapindika, whose name you will see in some Buddhist scriptures, that they were spending time on those grounds. So here we are, Packard and Woodlawn, Ann Arbor, Michigan. And because they practiced in their time and place, that allows us to be here today. And so that person-to-person interaction between teacher and student and this community is really central. When we take our three refuges, we call them the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. The Buddha representing both the historical figure, the original teacher, and our ability to awaken to the teacher that we all have within ourselves as well. The Dharma, the teachings, and then the Sangha, which is not just our Buddhist practitioner community, but also the wider notion of a Sangha of all beings. And so those three elements are really kind of the sort of central foundation for how we talk about our practice. But there's not really a curriculum per se to become a Buddhist student or teacher, or it's hard to explain. There's something about putting ourselves in contact with other people who have been doing this for many years, watching what they do, learning certainly some of the formal elements of ritual and the chants that we do and things like that, and learning some of the formal scriptures and teachings. But there's a person-to-person sort of just transmission that happens too. The way that we see Haju make a bow. The way that we see Ma'um hold her coffee cup with two hands, very mindfully enjoying coffee. Or any of the other just little sort of embodied aspects of practice. It was funny because when we were in Chicago, we were getting ready to meet, and the Mok talk was played to sort of call everyone back into the meeting. And we were in the lower floor, and in the upper floor, we heard some heavy footsteps go running by. And one of the teachers said, "That must have been a student, because teachers don't walk like that." So there's a notion that we're coming to be transformed by this person-to-person interaction, even maybe in small ways that take a long time to notice. But at the same time, Zen is really full of paradoxes. One of the anecdotes that Haju likes to share is that when her teacher, Samu Sunam, our founder from Korea, who came to North America in the 1960s, when he was asked, what does Sunam mean? It's sort of an honorific that, Haju Sunam, Samu Sunam, Doan Sunam from Mexico was with us last week. He would sometimes say, it means old, bald-headed idiot. Well, it means, teacher or elder kind of thing. So there's that paradox. Being ordained is this process where you take all of these special vows, and it's a big commitment. Yet at the same time, when I was learning to sew this casa, the instructions that I found, I was sort of reverse engineering the pattern. I was like, well, I think it's kind of like this tablecloth pattern. So if I follow that, I'll be able to figure it out. So nothing special in a sense. And that paradox is there again. Oh, I forgot. I told my husband I was going to tell this brief story too. When we got back from Chicago, my husband was talking to his friend Paul on the phone, and Paul's like, "Oh, well, what did you guys do this weekend?" And my husband, "Oh, well, I took Kelly to Chicago, and it was her ordination ceremony, and now she's officially a teacher." And he said, and my husband said, "Yeah, but her secret is that she does all of her yelling at home," which is true. So there's the juicy tension of our aspirations and vows and our sort of the meat of our daily lives as well. And I think my own path in practice has been one kind of in learning to become my own teacher in a sense, before I even thought about pursuing formal training. I originally came to the temple when I was in grad school about 10 years ago. And I was just really anxious. I had a lot going on. I was worried about school. I was worried about being able to find a job. And I was simply interested in the temple because when I came and sat here with other people in silence, I felt like some cobwebs got cleared out of my mind. And then I felt a little bit lighter when I left. And that's why I came, and nothing more complicated than that. But over time, I really saw how the practice allowed me to notice the habits that I was bringing into my daily life, where I was causing suffering for myself and others with those habits. How the meditation practice gave me the space to begin to notice and to not immediately act on things, to stand in that threshold a little bit longer. And I think that is kind of the first step of becoming our own teacher. It's really important to have a community of practitioners, and if you aspire to a more formal training relationship, to find a teacher to work with. And it's really important to begin to develop that discernment and wisdom as your own teacher. And Sunam would often say, or so I am told, that our practice is a practice of self-help. We'd hear that phrase a lot. And it seems kind of simplistic, but as I keep doing it, I really like that idea that we can learn to help ourselves. We can learn by helping ourselves, we're helping others, and it's all connected. So when we think about becoming our own teacher or a teacher in a formal sense, sort of what are some of the aspects of that teacher-student relationship? And again, I think this is one that we play for ourselves, as well as if we are in a teacher-student relationship with a formal teacher. So I often liken it to we're inviting our teacher to hold up a mirror, and then we're kind of looking in it together. Like, oh, what do you notice? This is what I'm seeing. And it's a collaborative process, and it's very open. Sometimes, though, you don't like what you see in the mirror. But because you're both looking in it together, it doesn't feel like shame or judgment. It feels like, oh, I can see clearly. Okay, that's what's going on. Other aspects of becoming your own teacher is just following the precepts. You may not have formally taken precepts. Some of you have. And those are just sort of our basic moral guidelines for how we conduct ourselves in our lives. Do not harm, but cherish all life. You could spend a whole lifetime just figuring out, what does that really mean and how do I live it? And it maybe changes from situation to situation. I think there's also an aspect of really figuring out how do we embody the practice in a way that is our own. It's really appealing to see charismatic teachers and feel a connection with them, and to think, man, if I was like that, I would really have it all figured out. But I think that there's an aspect of really appreciating and absorbing from our formal teachers, and then also to not try to be anybody but yourself. I really appreciate Haju telling me several years ago when I was sort of, worried about perfectionism and achievement and these things at work. And she would tell me, it's about being a good earthy potato. Just being completely ordinary. What do you think that would be like? So I think about that a lot, actually. And then I think there's also an aspect of the teacher mind that takes a really long view, that has the idea that the situations that we encounter, the people that we encounter who are challenging for us, situations that are challenging for us personally, that there's a notion of impermanence, both in the joy of impermanence, like, wow, this is amazing and it's not going to last, and the joy of impermanence of, this was really hard and it's not going to last. And there's that paradox again. So, I'm a full-time employee at a job, and I often find myself looking at some of the things that I've learned at work through the lens of Dharma. And a few years ago, I had the opportunity to work with a woman who was kind of a coach, like on communication and organization, how the teams work really well together. And a lot of what she said, kind of in retrospect now, had a lot of Dharma to them for me. So she would often coach us that, if she hears someone say the word but, she would pause and say, well, what if you replace that with and? Because you'll hear this speech pattern pretty often, like yada, 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 but it's like we're kind of discounting everything that we've just said. That was really great, but, and immediately you hear that word and you kind of tense up. So this was something she was trying to teach us. Like, if you're saying that to someone or you're giving feedback to someone and you find that but creeping in, you're making these artificial divisions. So if you just start saying and in place of but, you're going to notice that people respond to you differently. And she was right. It takes a while to change even something as simple as that little habit of speech. And at the same time, even little things like that can kind of shift our outlook. I guess I would say that, but is sort of that playing small, this thing I like, this thing, no. And is kind of embracing the paradox. Man, these two things are coexisting. Maybe I don't like one that much, and I like this thing over here, but I'm creating this lack of separation in the way that I talk about it. And so I think that in the wider sense, or maybe to extend the metaphor, that yes and practice is that place where we notice, okay, here's a spot where I can pause and see what wisdom does my own teacher have, the inner teacher that I'm developing. This is hard and I can learn. This is suffering and it won't last forever. I'm a dedicated practitioner and I procrastinated until last night on finishing sewing my casa so I could get it done for today. So all of these things are true. So how do you know if the yes and mind is present? I think when we find ourselves wanting to make that artificial division to use the but, I think that's the invitation to the threshold where we're pausing. Okay, what's really going on here? How am I reacting to this situation? And maybe when we notice that invitation to the threshold and we start to pause, that's one of those first and kind of situations. Maybe when we apologize out of tenderness and a desire to repair our connection with someone else and not out of shame and remorse, maybe that's an and situation. One of my favorite ones is when I'm at work and I have my little work persona on and I'm typing away and I got to email a lot of people. And now all the email programs even tell you what you can write. So I'm just like this robot person hitting tab and could you please, and per my last email. But that's the kind of the but situation. But if I'm not doing that and I'm really paying attention and I'm actually kind of pausing and connecting with the person on the other side, sometimes I find myself starting to type Jagwa. Thanks, Jagwa. Nobody at work knows that my Dharma name is Jagwa. And I'm like, oh, that was kind of an and situation. That was sort of a situation where my best self showed up to write that email. So these are all places where we're really allowing ourselves to be seen. There's more of an intimacy, which makes it scary. And I have a little story about that. So my husband and I, for many years until the pandemic, would go at least once a year to this place in Oregon. It's sort of a personal retreat center, so it's not Buddhist, although they have different kinds of workshops, and some of them are meditation workshops and yoga and sound baths and really any cool new age thing you could think of, they have there. It's up in the woods. And there had been sort of a regular teacher there who's a singing teacher. And his workshop is called The Natural Singer. So his idea is that he can teach anyone to sing with his methods, even if you think you can't sing. I love to sing, and I've always sung since I was little, but I have never taken the workshop. And several years ago, we were there when they were teaching the workshop, and he offered, even if you weren't taking the formal class, sort of an open mic night kind of experience where he would teach a few of his techniques and anyone could come. And so I went to it maybe 5 or 6 years ago for this sort of open event. And I was too scared to get up and sing, but I really loved hearing everyone else. And so then a couple years ago, we were there and it happened to be the same workshop. And the guy was back and he did the open night again. And I was like, okay, I gotta go this year, you know. And one of the activities is that he will offer to coach you with some of his techniques, but you have to be willing to get up and stand up in front of the group, in the front of the room, and sing a song, and kind of let him coach you on the fly, like you don't know what's going to happen. So really an invitation to a yes and kind of situation that was very nerve-wracking, but I raised my hand. And so I got up, and he didn't really know how to play the piano to the song that I wanted. He's like, well, I'll just make up some chords, which was fine. It worked. It was an old Bob Dylan song. And as you're singing, he asks you kind of verbalize what's going on in your body. So if you're really nervous, you're just supposed to keep singing like, my legs are shaking and I feel really nervous right now. And by verbalizing that embodied experience, it kind of like lets it out, and then people would really start to loosen up. And then sometimes he would have you sing, okay, now sing it as if, it's a comedy song. Now sing it as if it's a really sad love song. So you're really like exploring all the emotional tones. And then at the end, you do it one more time. So the line that I did, if you're traveling in the North Country far, where the wind hits heavy on the borderline, remember me to one who lives there. She once was a true love of mine. And his main coaching was allow yourself to be seen. And of course, by the end, everyone was crying like I am right now. And it was so beautiful, that allow yourself to be seen. I think about that all the time when I feel like I just want to protect myself. Because showing yourself is kind of risky. But that's really where the small self takes a break and that big teacher self can be present. So that's definitely embracing the paradox. Man, that's kind of scary, but really nice too, right? So I just wanted to end with an anecdote from this book, because I just kind of discovered this book. This is Norman Fisher, very well-known North American Zen teacher. This is his latest collection of essays from many years worth of writing. It's called When You Greet Me, I Bow, Notes and Reflections from a Life in Zen. And I just happened to stumble across an excerpt from this online where he talks about what does it mean to be a teacher. And so I thought it was very fitting and would like to read a little bit for you. One of my favorite Zen stories is about teachers. The great Zen teacher Wang Bo strides into the hall and says to the assembled monastics, "You people are all dreg slurpers. If you go on like this, when will you ever see today? Don't you know that in all of China, there are no teachers of Zen?" A monastic comes forward and says to him, "Then what about all those people like you who set up Zen places that students flock to like birds?" Wang Bo replies, "I don't say there is no Zen, only that there are no teachers." Okay, so then he comes back to this at the end. The fundamental trust is the magic of the teacher-student relationship, and I think the goal of practice, liberation itself. Having confidence in someone who we look toward as an example and inspiration, and coming to trust that person completely, even when they seem not to be cooperating with our ideas about who they should be and how they should behave, and even when they make mistakes, is the path toward deep trust and confidence in ourselves, our true selves, and in life, no matter what it brings. In the end, teacher and student are fluid roles, positions, not persons. Sometimes the student is the teacher, and sometimes the teacher is the student. In the Soto Zen Dharma transmission ceremony, this reality is ritually enacted. And in Zen lineage charts, the red line of succession goes from Buddha down through the generations of teachers to the present disciple, and then back up to Buddha. So each one of us, when we find our feet in the Dharma, are not only the teacher of our own teacher, but the teacher of Buddha and his successors. Such radical independence, which is identical with interdependence. For our true self is no self and all selves, is what both student and teacher hold as their common treasure. Once someone asked a monastic, "Do you agree with your teacher or not?" And the monastic responded, "I half agree." Why only half? If I agreed completely, then I would be ungrateful. We must trust ourselves. We must trust each other. We and everything that exists are teachers of Zen, which is why there are no teachers of Zen. So Maum has some announcements.
So thank you for joining us today, both in person and online. And thanks to Jagwa, who allowed us to see her as a good, earthy, ordinary potato. And we are looking forward to many future Dharma talks. So it's always special when a new teacher joins the fold. A few announcements, and then we'll have opportunity to socialize those who are present here. So please continue to join us every Sunday out under the canopy at 10 a.m. if you can come, or on live stream. So even if you are in Oregon or China, we invite you to tune in to our weekly Sunday services at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. After service, Recovery Dharma has meetings on Sunday, and there are, if you receive our e-bulletin, there is a link to those Recovery Dharma meetings, which are happening via Zoom. If you're not subscribed to the Temple e-bulletin, please just call the Temple or drop a line, and I'll make sure to get you on the subscription so you can have all that information. On Wednesday evening, meditation practice continues via Zoom from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And we also have a study group on the Way of Bodhisattva on Wednesday mornings if you're interested in either of those. One other thing I would like to mention is our Temple Stay program. We are delighted to have old friends coming from other places, Chicago, other states, just to come and be at the temple for a few days with us. And that opportunity is available to you as well, whether you live here or whether you live from someplace else. We have a longer term residency program as well, if you're interested in living here for several months or a year. Or you might be like one of the current residents who shows up and says, I'm going to stay for a week. And then 5 years later, we look back and say, gee, we're still here. So you never know what happens in this wonderful student-teacher thing that goes on here at the temple. Thank you for your donations online or in person. We have a donation bowl. I know that many of you do not do cash or checks anymore. So you can send contributions by PayPal. Hopefully by next week, we'll have a little app that you can just scan and make it much easier for you. So I think that's it. Any announcements that I've missed that anybody knows about? Okay, not seeing any. We're going to end with the 4 great vows. Let's do it together. All beings, one body, I vow to liberate. Blind passions, one root, I vow to terminate. Dharma gates, one mind, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to realize. Speaking vow, sending love to everybody. So those who are present, please feel free to enjoy